I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships,
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Hello.
Hello.
It's not light out this time.
It is not. Yeah. There might be lights out, though.
Oh, my Lanta.
The Northern Lights.
You can go look after the
out.
podcast. You did find them. You got some pretty awesome pictures last night.
Bro, that was all pure luck. Like, it was one strand in the sky, and then all of a sudden it was like, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet.
It was. You were stoked about it. I was happy because you were happy. It was a good time.
Yeah. Anyways, what, my dear, are we talking about today?
Well, see, technically, the title will probably be something along the lines of difference between how men and women process emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's going to be about emotions. So basically, the deal is, well, I guess we'll slow roll some of the news that we keep talking about, because we said last time we were going to do the next podcast, we talk about all the stuff, and that was the plan. But I have a way better one, so we're going to kick that down the road a little more. But one of the big things, which I think we kind of already announced, but we'll talk about it again, is that you and I got certified in relationship mentoring coaching, both in like a standard therapist style as well as faith-based. We got certified through a program that most of your churches that have marital mentorships in the U.S. use. A lot of therapists and counselors and whatnot endorse it as well. So we have full access to those tools and that certification just to add to everything we already do. With that, the next step for me was finishing up a certification in neuroscience. More specifically, the kind of more medical side of things, if you will. We've talked about it a little bit before, but you have a background in teaching and therapy and stuff like that. I have a lot of background in business, and then as well as like NLP, neuroscience, that sort of stuff. Done a lot of for both of us, the physical side of things. Especially like some of the events and things that I've done and been to, and with our men's group that, I help with, co-lead with. We use a lot of NLP techniques in the way that we work with the men in that group and coach them and connect biblical truths to, reality and that sort of things.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I can go on and about all this stuff in our background and our resumes and whatnot, but the key here is this neuroscience certification that I'm finishing up here should be done actually this week, and then rolling into next week, I'll have that certification. Why I am bringing this up is because the unit of study that I finished up this morning actually was on emotions. And I think this is really important because I took pieces of this study, if you will, and actually made some really cool connections as it relates to relationships. And I think that this would be an awesome thing for us to talk about, and basically share the stuff that I've seen, or stuff that I learned, as well as the connections that I made, as well as us just talk about stuff that we already know, right? But I think that this is really going to take things to the next level, and it gives us a way to actually express this in a very clear, static manner from a medical side of things, right? Mm-hmm. To connect to the biblical truths that we constantly talk about. So I want to start out with this psychological definition of basically emotions. Okay. It says, psychologically speaking, emotions are also defined as constellations of highly intense response that comprise typical physiological and subjective expressive manifestations that are usually accompanied by characteristic patterns of action and take place as a break in the continuity in relation to the process that was ongoing in the subject when they surfaced. That's a whole lot, right? So basically, it's a really fancy thing of saying, hey, you had some type of physiological manifestation that came up in the middle of a process that was ongoing due to an environment that actually changed the process, right? So it gives a little bit of context of like, okay, this is a random occurrence, right? And here's what's so interesting I found about this part of this certification that I'm doing is from a medical standpoint, defining emotions is actually not a precise thing like other medical things, right? Because doctors and scientists can say, well, yeah, this part of your system or that part of your nervous system, all this stuff interconnects, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but they don't actually know where emotions come from. Like as far as like physically what, can they draw a point of like initiation and they can't, right? And so I think this is really important when you look at it from dealing with a relationship and with two partners, right? Because when you think about the emotional situation, it brings a little bit of context to the fact of sometimes I believe that we struggle to work through emotions in relationships, right? And when you understand that even modern medicine can't actually define it well because they don't know the origin point, it's kind of like, okay, let's have a little grace here, right?
Yeah.
Back to your, 1 Corinthians 13, love is kind, right? And so it gives you that little bit of grace of, okay, you should be more understanding. And this applies to just humans, right? There's no male, female, just humans in general. But this brings me to the next point, right? Where society has basically long stated that men are logical and women are emotional, right? We hear that all the time. We've even said it or hinted to it in the past. And what I want to do today is I'm actually going to challenge that, right? And I want to challenge this because emotions essentially are not static, okay? They're basically scientifically proven to be 100% subjective. And where we say, oh, women are more emotional, men are more logical, women actually have a more outward expression of emotion than men. But that doesn't mean they're actually more emotional. And from a medical standpoint, actually women are better at not only feeling emotions, navigating emotions, but actually working through them.
I could have told you that.
Right. Well, we're going to bring it up here because I think the society teaches something different, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of this has to do with, men just internalizing it, right? So what I would challenge is that men think in a more systematic way, whereas women think in a more fluid way. But both of them elicit an emotional response. The outward expression is where the difference lies, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it changes the context of this, because when you come at it from this worldly view of, well, men are logical, women are emotional, it skews your ability to navigate through emotions, right? Because you're looking at it through a false lens of what's actually occurring. And in a way, men use this as a deflection to almost point to, well, she's just being emotional, and kind of like not, I guess, basically deflecting fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not taking the time to look in the mirror. So what I found interesting too is that, the emotional difference between men and women, and the fact that we try to make it, well, that's just how people are biologically.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, from a medical perspective, parts of the nervous system, which one of the main parts that's responsible for emotions is also responsible for memory, which is an important thing here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll loop back to it. But when you talk about, from a medical standpoint, where emotions come from, and what responses they're on their body, men and women are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened over time is there's been thousands of years of programming, right? Sociocultural programming,
Mm-hmm.
where men and women have different roles.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. And I do think that, to a certain extent, right, we were designed that way, right? And there's a lot of biblical context to support this as well, in biblical scripture. But what I will say is that we also know there's like extreme cases, right, throughout history. And what's really interesting is the way that men and women deal with emotions and the outward expression, or their ability to receive, has a lot to do with that programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which then also gives us a little bit different context to look at emotions inside of relationships, right? Because it's less about biology. That does play a part, but it's more about what society has done for the past couple thousand years, right? With that, we kind of touched on the women are better at reading, identifying, and controlling emotions, right? Where typically men tend to have like 2 to 3 settings, right? Quiet, reserved, or extreme, right? Like, men don't have that middle ground. And I think that oftentimes we basically stand behind this, like, well, men are supposed to be stoic and this and that. And that's true. We should be the rock for our woman. But this, hey, we're supposed to be stoic and she's just going to have emotions all over the place, is not necessarily the truth, right?
Yeah.
She's actually better at letting her emotions basically come out, regulate, work through them, express them, all these sort of things, versus just being an on and off switch, right?
Yeah.
Like men. Because, essentially we have different processes and patterns that, of expressions and emotions and that sort of thing. But what I found really interesting about all of this, and I want to bring up this point too, before we kind of get into some back and forth discussion, is how much our emotions are actually based on memory, right? And so when I talk about, hey, one of the primary places in your nervous system that is responsible for emotions and the expression of emotions in a physical way, is also responsible for memory, which I found very interesting, because when you actually look at examples of this, it's actually pretty clear that there's a direct connection, right?
I can give you an easy example of that.
I'll give you the one that I read today, and then we'll hear your example.
Okay.
So if you think about it, right? So let's use a scenario. 3 friends go to a romantic movie. One friend cries because they're happy and filled with joy and reminded of their current partner. One friend cries because they are sad and reminded of the partner that died or left them. The third isn't crying because they've never experienced love or loss. Right? So when you think about that, you've elicited 3 different emotional responses based on memory. The situation didn't change. The movie didn't change. the words that were spoken, the pictures that were shown, the music that was played, none of that changed.
Mm-hmm.
The difference were the memories that each person had.
Mm-hmm.
What do you got? You said you got a good example.
Oh, yeah. There's a very specific song that when I hear it, automatically brings me back to, I don't want to say traumatic, but like a really not great event that happened when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. But like literally just hearing that song can trigger that same almost emotion that I had then from that event.
Yeah.
I still, like, to this day, don't like that song.
Right. Right. And that's a perfect example, right? And so there was this interesting little the last piece of this puzzle here is thoughts versus emotions, right? Thoughts, these are forms of interpretation of an individual, themselves, and their environment or those around them. They are very closely linked to the individual's abilities. Emotions, these are involuntary sensations and automatic reactions to the influences of the environment. And your behavior is the result of those two things. So I wanted to talk about this because when I started really thinking through this, right, and thinking about all of these factors and how all of this stuff played in together, right, I think it's important to have the historical context. But I also think it's very important when we're talking about navigating emotions inside of a relationship to acknowledge that a large driving factor, if not the main or possibly even like 99% of it, right? Of course, from a medical standpoint, there's not a specific amount per se, but a large driving factor in our emotions are related to memories,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you're navigating with your spouse and they have an emotional reaction to something, right? I want to give a context of how this would play out, okay? So, or a common one, right? So you're in a previous relationship and you're in this new or you were in a previous relationship, you're in this new relationship now. Well, regardless of it's he or she, whichever spouse you're talking about, their ex-partner cheated on them. So the new partner does something that, maybe interacts or laughs with a waitress or a waiter and it triggers them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Becomes a fight in the car on the way home. They get home. Now they're fighting. One partner is basically telling them all the ways they were wrong for the actions that they had. The other partner's telling them all the ways they're wrong for being so insecure.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into this downhill spiral of throwing bricks at each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you understand that emotions are an involuntarily expression of your nervous system expressing memories,
Mm-hmm.
and when you make that connection for both partners, right? Because one, I get it. We have to work through these things. It's going to take time. But two, your new partner is not your old partner, right? So don't take it out on them, right? So there's two sides of this coin.
Yeah.
But if both partners could go into this with the perspective of this is your nervous system creating an involuntary reaction or expression of a memory, that totally changes how you deal with them.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when you start getting into, this is where like knowing the science behind it and understanding that, neurons in your body are your receptors, right? And you've got electrical signals and chemical signals. So things like hormones are actually a chemical basically a way to chemically transmit signals to neurons, right? That's all it is, which is crazy when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
It's like writing an email to different neurons, right? That's what your hormones and all, your adrenaline and noradrenaline, all this stuff is.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from that perspective and you can see, hey, this is this reaction, and you've got your body involuntarily sending these signals to neurons. One, we know that we can actually amplify certain neurons or shut certain neurons down through our internal conversations,
Mm-hmm.
through the things we teach ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, one, what's really cool is we can 100% program this.
Yeah, you can rewire it.
For sure. But two, when it comes to navigating these things with your partner, if you understand that, like I said, and I've said it multiple times, and that's intentional, right? The involuntary expression of a memory,
Mm-hmm.
the person that is having the heightened emotion initially, as well as the person that is receiving, can both look at this differently and actually communicate in a different manner when you understand that simple fact.
Mm-hmm. It does that change how you see situations, but also helps you to understand, like, we've had this conversation before, and I've talked about it on podcasts previously, but there will be times that you and I are having a disagreement or just not understanding each other great in the moment, and I'll have to be like, this reminds me of something that has happened previously.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling currently, which is exactly that, right? It's an involuntary, like, expression of your nervous system reacting to something that feels similar from your past, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't necessarily know how to communicate that as properly. That's what you're saying, but it does make a lot of sense. The other thing that my brain kept going to while you were talking about this, though, is how society has basically programmed men to believe that you're, like, not emotional or shouldn't be emotional. Like, you should keep that inside. That's not something you should express or whatever. And for some reason, like, what kept coming to my head was, like, all of these verses in the Bible of Jesus being emotional. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he was actually a very emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of moments in the Bible where he had that outward expression of emotion. Think about him dumping the tables and in the
Mm-hmm.
synagogue. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
just was flipping tables because he was mad. It was an outward expression of his emotion because he was mad and upset. And there's so many examples of that in the Bible. So it is interesting that, like, that is how society has, like, reprogrammed men. Like, you shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't have emotions. You need to keep them to yourself. I actually remember several conversations that we had when we were in our earlier stages of dating about how you were very adamant, like, I'm not emotional. Like, you have to be emotional, you know? But I think that comes with that programming, and it has changed throughout the, like, entirety of our relationship, but it's just interesting to think about. I've also learned, like, how to express my emotions better because I used to be really bad at keeping everything inside. Like, I learned to just keep all of my emotions inside,
Mm-hmm.
that I shouldn't express them. And in my own process of healing and growth, I've learned that, like, I have to get out my emotions. And that's something we talk about a lot because, like, if I'm feeling even slightly overwhelmed in the moment, like, I'm gonna have to cry. Like, I just have to get it out, and then I'll be okay. But if I don't get it out, like, it's just gonna build and become an issue.
Well, so I'm about to blow your mind here just a second with some scripture, right? Okay, so check this out. So with that, we know, right, from our experience and everything that we've learned, that, men tend to be more like, no, I want to fight right now. Their response is this warrior type mindset, right? And women are very much like, I'm going to stew in the emotions and I'm going to hold a grudge, right? We see that all the time in relationships. From a medical standpoint, that's also how men and women deal with emotions, right? So check this out. So in 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says, we demolish arguments, and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Okay? So, we talked about the memories, right? Being able to reprogram this. So what does that look like? What does it mean that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, right? And to be obedient to Christ. Well, check this out. So in John 15:12, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you, right? 1 John 4:7, beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. 1 Peter 4:8, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Okay. So, what does the Bible say? By 2 or more witnesses, right? All things are established. Okay. So, like we talk about all the time, if something is true, you're going to see it all throughout the Bible, multiple places, right? So here's multiple places talking about love is the answer, right? Love is like Jesus. Love is how you cover up the sins, how you get rid of the sins, right? Making us obedient to Christ, like him, is through love, right? But let's go a step further, because Leviticus, okay, same concept, right? Taking our minds captive, talking about how emotional responses are involuntary responses to memories. Okay, we're going to take our thoughts captive though, right? So Leviticus 19:18 says, you shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Lord. Okay, so let's back up. How do men and women deal with conflict? Men says, we're going to fight right now. That's the vengeance. How do women deal with it? They hold a grudge. Nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself, right? And then you go back to the other verses, right? We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Right? So when you talk about from a relational aspect, right? From a medical aspect, your emotions, the things that create these involuntary responses based on your memories, right? Okay, well, we know that these are nervous system reactions. It's going to create chemicals and electrical impulses for your neurons in your body to create a reaction, right? And whatever that looks like, whether it's verbalizing, whether it's a physical act, right? These are all just electrical and chemical signals being transmitted through neurons, okay? But right here in the scripture, it's telling us, do not respond with vengeance. Do not hold a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
Take your thoughts captive, right? And basically anything that is against the knowledge of God, right? And anything that's against being obedient to Christ. What is his biggest commandment? Love.
Yeah.
Love your God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? When Jesus was asked by the Pharisees, what is the greatest commandment? It was that right there.
Yeah.
Right? So when you look at that from an actual relational and medical and physiological perspective, okay, we're told how to do this. And then when we make this joke all the time about how neuroscience is just catching up to what Jesus taught 2,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, now we know through neuroscience, right, that the way your body, the way anything does anything in your body is electrical impulses or chemical, impulses are like having a computer chip, right? Transmitting electronic signals, or like if anybody remembers dial-up internet is a good, send an electrical signal through a wire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or chemical transmission, because the chemicals inside of our body are just ways to transfer different information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we know that our internal conversations, right? We talked about this recently,
Mm-hmm.
how the internal conversations that we tell ourselves, about our spouse, right? How this affects so many different things, and you can reprogram your brain, right? From a neuroscience perspective, you can actually, they've done tests on this. They've done it on children, they've done it on adults, right? There are a ton of different things. If you continue to use, it's like when we talk about, okay, when you practice something, right?
Yeah.
How do you get good at it? Well, I practice it over and over and over, right? People say, oh, well, I'm building up muscle memory. Well, what they don't realize is muscle memory is you actually closing off certain neurons and bulking up, right? And improving and creating other neurons,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which then makes you good at whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we know, people talk about emotions and this and that, and, well, these are, the control of it and this and that and da, 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 da. Okay. But if we know that an involuntary response in our nervous system is going to make us react to a memory, then how do we change that, right? How does that couple not go home fighting in the car because the husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance was a little too friendly with the waiter or waitress and it triggered a memory?
Mm-hmm.
You take every thought captive
Mm-hmm.
and you reprogram.
Yeah. Well, and even when you're talking about love, like we've talked about this before, love is not an emotion or a feeling. Love is an action.
Yeah.
But then take it back to scripture again, and as we talk about a million times, 1 Corinthians 13 gives you what love is,
Mm-hmm.
how to do love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not brag. It does not behave inappropriately. It does not keep an account of wrongs. It's not provoked. It does not rejoice over injustice, but rejoices in the truth. These are all what love is. So love is the action, not the emotion. These are the things that make that action,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's also the way that you begin to rewire your emotions and the way that you handle situations. Are you being patient? Are you being kind? Are you being envious?
Yeah.
Are you bragging about things? Are you keeping an account of all the wrongs?
Well, check this out, right? So we go into you want to talk about even taking this a step further. So if you look up the word love, right, from a Hebrew context, because we know like the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, right? A lot of the New Testament was written in Greek, but let's go back to the very beginning, right, and talk about Hebrew context. So here's basically the key biblical terms for love that were used in the Bible, right? Because see, here's the problem is you have to understand context to understand what's being said, right? When we read it in the English translation, we have one word for love. So every time you see love in the Bible, it says love.
Yeah.
But there's actually multiple versions of love in the Bible in the Hebrew context, right? In the scrolls. So 3 words. Ahava. This is the most common term, referring to deep affection, loyalty, and commitment. It covers romantic love, Song of Songs, parental love, Abraham for Isaac, and God's love for Israel. Hesed, translated as steadfast love, loving kindness, or covenant faithfulness. It refers to an unwavering, loyal love that holds a relationship together regardless of circumstances. And then Rahamin, often translated as compassion or mercy, describing a deeply emotional, nurturing love similar to compassion. Okay. In biblical Hebrew, love is primarily expressed as an action and covenantal loyalty rather than an emotion. The core term ahava stems from the root hav, meaning to give. It represents a conscious choice to act for another's benefit, exemplified by God's steadfastness or steadfast, undeserved affection for his people, hesed, and the required devoted response from humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that, even in the Shema, right, which we've talked about this. So in Deuteronomy 6:5, you have the Shema, which means to hear, which once again, when you understand Hebrew, Hebrew is not written in this modern Western culture that we have now, right? Where everybody is like a think and you feel. No, Hebrew is a do language, which means it is action, right?
Yep.
It's not a like just sit and feel and think, right? So in the Shema, the central commandment is to love God with all one's heart, soul, and strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which indicates total proactive devotion. But what I want to point out is that when you look at this, right, love is not an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these sensations that you get, what are emotions? They're involuntary responses from your nervous system based on memory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you have good memories about your spouse, you get these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about programming a way to anchor those memories, right? Like we talked about, like doing the ring, right? So when you play with your ring, with people who are married, right, that wear a ring, commonly play with the wedding ring, right? Just to fiddle, do something with their hands because it's there, right?
Yeah.
Talked about anchoring those memories to that, like our wedding day, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to learn how to do that, by the way? Shameless plug. Go to thecovenantchronicles.com. On there, it literally, there's a relationship audit. It's 10 questions. It'll tell you exactly where you're at. That was, by the way, spoiler alert, one of the updates. We've gotten rid of the actual form that you print out. There's a 10-question thing. It is somewhat of a funnel, and we're going to try and hide it. It basically goes to having a call with us, right? You want to learn how to do these tricks. You want to change your relationship. Go through the steps, set up the call. Okay. If we actually work with you, we will teach you how to anchor these memories. You want to know how to do that? It's a lot simpler than it seems. You can literally anchor your memories to where you do certain actions, or you play with your wedding ring, and subconsciously you will recall your wedding day and start smiling, right? You talk about involuntary actions. Like, we can anchor those memories and then create an involuntary action, right?
Yeah.
That then boosts your confidence. It boosts your mood. It boosts your feeling, right?
Yeah.
When you're arguing with your spouse, what if you could instantly do that? Do some action that you're starting to have an argument that's not going well. You do an action. You involuntarily smile and have this little boost or rush of feelings that shifts your mindset, right? But it all connects, right? And what I really wanted to drive home with all of this, because it is a lot, right? And you might have to listen to the first part of this podcast a couple of times to really hear all the medical mumbo jumbo, or, the big words, or kind of, piece together exactly what I was getting at with all of this information, right? But it all connects. It all goes back to, here's the scientific of how God built your body to work. Here's the scriptures of what not to do.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, here's the neuroscience of the scriptures telling you, right? Because it tells you not to do this, or to do this, right? To love, or to not, do these other things. Cool. How do I do that?
Yeah.
Well, but my trauma. Okay. Right?
You can work through anything.
100%. I was just talking to one of my clients recently, and we talked about something, and I brought up something, right? And they had talked about some things they'd been through, and they had said something, and I started going through this track of how to get there. And you could tell they initially wanted to respond with, well, but it happened. I can't bury it, right? No, you don't bury it. But the situation didn't change. What you change is how burying it is changing the situation, right? You're trying to hide it behind a wall to try to pretend it didn't exist.
Yeah.
That doesn't fix anything. That isn't actually processing emotions. You're just bottling stuff up until you boil over.
Right.
Right. But you can change your view of a situation. You can reprogram your neurons to view a situation in a different way. Right. And when I gave this client the example of how that looks, it was like you saw a light bulb go off and they go, oh, and it was, they would describe a pretty traumatic event in their life. And it was like the light bulb went off of like, I get it. Right. And here's the thing, like the stuff that we're talking about, there's some fancy words at the beginning of the podcast. That stuff doesn't matter, right? This is really simple. You want to know the manual of how do you live your life? Well, the cool thing is we were given a manual. It's called the Bible. You should probably go start reading it if you don't, right? But secondly, these techniques and stuff, like the knowledge is abundantly there. And so taking this stuff and just applying it in your relationship, right? You wonder why, when you go look at the statistics, the vast majority of marriages that go to actual counseling or therapy fail. It's like 80-some%, right? I think it's like I'd have to look it up. I haven't seen this statistic in a long time. To be honest, it's probably over 90%, but I know for a fact it's over 80%.
Yeah.
Right? Because talking and just sitting here talking about the same
your feelings.
thing. Huh?
Talking about your feelings doesn't change them.
Talking about your feelings and having zero guidance of, okay, how do we change our view on these memories, right? Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
The events aren't going anywhere, but you can change the view of those events. Right? And so, we talked about spiritual warfare recently. And that is one thing. If you go back to the scriptures I just read, okay, connect all the dots of what I just said, right? Connect all the dots of how you do this.
Yeah.
We were talking to a friend of ours, and they had, given an example, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about how someone close to them doesn't believe in like spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, did you not just hear the scriptures I just read? How can you not think that your responses and just reliving these events in your life and allowing all these emotions to come out in a way that it sabotages your relationship, sabotages your parenting, it sabotages your day, your week, your month, your year?
Yeah.
You don't think that's spiritual warfare?
Yeah. We've mentioned it several times recently, like your thoughts are not really your own thoughts.
No.
So are you taking
Right
your
there in the
thoughts
scriptures,
captive
it says,
or
to take them captive.
Yeah.
Anything that's against, well, the enemy's against, right? And in the same scriptures that we're talking about taking our thoughts captive and, the knowledge of God and doing everything for, in basically alignment with the knowledge of God and to be obedient to Christ, we're also saying to, essentially avoid anything that is in line with the opposite of that.
Yeah.
The enemy is going to attack you in any way he can, and he's going to push a button when he knows something works.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's why you have the same thoughts on repeat and you can't get rid of them.
Come on, people. This isn't rocket science.
Yeah.
This isn't rocket science. This isn't some crazy outlandish theory. Like, connect the dots. You have this same thought over and over and over about your spouse, how annoying they are, how they did this one thing to you a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years, 10, 15, whatever it was. And you haven't reprogrammed yourself to view that differently. And you don't think the enemy is just sitting here pushing that button on repeat? Why would he find new stuff to attack? I mean, he's certainly going to if he can.
Yeah.
But you're making it so easy because all he's got to do is hit the return button on his keyboard. Just
works
beep,
every time.
Beep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
He tries to keep covenant relationships broken up because it is one of the most powerful tools against him. When you have a relationship that is built on a covenant and it's built with God at the center, that is one of the most powerful tools against the enemy, right? Think about us and the amount of people that have just said like they look up to and they really, see what we are as a couple, right? And they look up to that and they love seeing that and they're, just so impressed with what we've built. Well, we didn't do that. God did that, right? But think about the impact that has, right? Because like Jesus commanded us to do 3 things when he left the earth: teach, make disciples of men, and baptize people in my name. Okay, so what is the best way to make disciples? Well, we lead by example, right?
Yeah.
So when we have a relationship that is like this, it's built on a covenant that's centered on God, and people look up to that. Human nature is to say, okay, I want that. Cool. Read your Bible. You want it? We'll give you all the advice, but I'm going to tell you right now, step 1, read your Bible, right? Step 2, have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
That is a powerful, powerful tool to create other disciples, right? Because even if let's take apart or take out of it just the like us as a couple, right? What does that allow us to be as individuals outside of our house, right? And then we take that to others and then we build others up. And now we continue to create disciples. And then we come back, we get our recharge and go out and do it again, right?
Yeah.
The recharge is inside our own home. And when you look at that, that is one of the most powerful tools you can use against the enemy, is a covenant relationship that was built around or centered around God.
Yeah.
Right. And so with emotions, are you letting them run you, or are you taking your thoughts captive?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not, like we said, the enemy's just hitting the return button. That's all he's doing. Hitting the return, right? And running the same program over and over and over.
Yep.
And maybe it's not even the relationship. Maybe it's something from a previous relationship. Maybe it's something from your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
something that you're holding on to.
Yeah, but or it could be a bunch of things you're holding on to. But you're just running the same program over and over and over and over, and letting your emotions run you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they are an involuntary response, right? Because that's going to be the next. Well, if it's involuntary, how can I? If it's involuntary, it's just like dealing with somebody else. You can't control what somebody says, what somebody does. But the neurons are the receptors. And just like dealing with somebody else, you can actually change the receptors, right? You can change how you react to somebody. You can change.
Well, you can change how you see situations also. Like,
Correct.
yes, you are involuntarily reacting to something, but if you can change how you see the situation, you're going to change how you react to the situation.
Well, and that's through the practice of different, things that we've talked about, to build up neurons in a different way and shut down the old ones,
Mm-hmm.
which then causes you to receive the information. So, yeah, you might not be able to control that, emotional, that you do have a nervous system response.
Yeah.
But what you can control is the outward expression.
Yeah.
You can control whether it's a thought or whether it affects your behavior.
Yeah.
Right? You can control if you let it run the program for you, or if you're running the program.
Mm-hmm.
Better yet, if God's running the program.
Yeah.
Right? Anyways, that's what I got. That's all I got.
Yeah.
If you listen to this podcast, it's going to change your life. If you don't, well, I'm sorry. You missed out.
They won't know because they didn't listen.
Well,
So
that's on them. They're missing out.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
They should be running different programs so they listen.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, yes. This became a long one, but it was a good one.
All right.
Good stuff there.
Action for this week.
Uh-huh.
Go do the audit. 10 questions. thecovenantchronicles.com. It's right there. Relationship audit. Pulls up a page. Scroll down just a smidge, and it's right there in front of your face.
Yep. That's a good idea. And then work on reprogramming your emotions little by little.
Yep. All right, guys. Till next time.
We out.
Bye.
Bye.